Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere, nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Struggling with bloat or indigestion? You're not alone. 2 out of 3 Americans suffer from poor gut health. I'm Tina Anderson, co-founder of Just Thrive Probiotic. As a mom of 3, when no probiotic solved my family's tummy troubles, I created my own. Just Thrive Probiotic is the only probiotic that arrives 100% alive in your gut, supporting 5-star digestion, immunity, and better sleep. We even have a formula for pets. Use code POD20 for 20% off at justthrivehealth.com/podcasts.
But teacher, when are we ever going to use math in the real world?
With Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader, you don't have to. At least not car math. Hit the road with confidence knowing exactly what you're going to pay each month for your car. AutoTrader.
Hey everybody, what's going on? It is a Tuesday mailbag edition of the Utopia Football Podcast. I'm Sean Pendergast, one half of Payne and Pendergast on Sports Radio 610. It's nice to be with you. We're recording it around 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon. So I say that with the warning label that anything can happen even while we're on the air right here recording. If any news comes down in the middle of the podcast, I will react instantly to it. But man, it's been a crazy couple days if you're a Houston Texan fan. It's free agency. The legal tampering period is what we're sitting in the middle of right now. And the Texans certainly have been active in free agency, but the most noteworthy moves by the Texans so far have been their 2 trades. The trade of Laremy Tunsil, which is to me one of the biggest trades in the history of the organization for what it represents. And then the Kenyon Green trade, which might be one of the most unexpected trades of a player in the history of the franchise, given where Kenyon Green is on the distressed asset list that I keep in my back pocket all the time. I always carry a list of distressed assets around with me because you never know when a good investment opportunity may end up coming up. And maybe that's what happened for Philadelphia today. Maybe they got a distressed asset and they got Jeff Stoutland, their O-line coach, and he's gonna do a little fixer-upper job on Kenyon Green. We'll see. But we'll dig into those. We've got a mailbag as well. I've got a handful of mailbag questions that we will get to. This will be one of 2 episodes we do this week. I'll probably do a free agency, maybe not a wrap up because free agency is going to keep going for a while, but at least a wrap up of the initial wave of free agency. And then where we are with the Texans. I expect the Texans are going to continue to be active this week in making signings and maybe even making more trades, maybe even doing some further dismantling, of the offensive line. So we'll get into all that in a mailbag. A quick reminder before we do get into the A topics here, subscribe, rate, and review. I always appreciate that. Tell a friend about the podcast. This is about to get to be a really interesting 6 weeks or so as we watch the Texans strip down and then build back up their offensive line. It's almost like it's a mini rebuild going on within a team that's already advanced in its overall rebuild. It's this has been one of the more remarkable things I've watched a GM and a head coach do over these last few days. I'm here for it. I'm excited about it. And if you want to be around for it and my opinion on it, then give us a subscribe, hit us with a rating and a review. Always love that, especially when they're good. But be honest, give me your honest feelings. And if you didn't get an email in this week for the mailbag, there's always next week. houmailbag@gmail.com. This time of year, I'm doing off-season stuff for the Texans as far as the mailbag questions go. Draft is fair game. Anything Astros is fair game. Rockets, fair game. And then anything off kilter. A lot of you like to send in emails and then have a little non-football thing at the bottom of it, which is awesome. I love doing stuff like that. So whatever it is you want to do, I just like the interaction. I'm not lonely or anything. I do this podcast solo. My wife lives here with me. I've got plenty of people in my life. But as far as this podcast goes, I love the interaction. So whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening wherever it is you get your podcast, either way, give us a subscribe, a rating, and a review. All right, let's start with the moves the Texans have made. The big ones are obviously the trades, sending Laremy Tunsil to Washington and sending Kenyon Green to Philadelphia. We have shipped our garbage up to the NFC East. I shouldn't say garbage. That's a little bit mean. Our recyclables we've shipped up there. How's that? So we know that we know how this Texan season went, right? They're 10-7. They win the division again. They get to the divisional round, and then they fall flat against Kansas City. So the team fell short, and I think it's pretty clear now, given how the front office and D'Amico Ryans have handled the coaching staff, and given now how they're handling the offensive line, it is very, very clear. When it came time to assign blame to the failure of this team in 2024, and when I say failure, I mean the fact that they fell short of the AFC title game, which is now their stated goal. D'Amico said it a few times this offseason, is to at least get to the AFC title game. When you look at the behavior of the team since the season ended, there's only one conclusion to draw, and that is they are putting the lion's share, if not the totality of the blame, on the front porch of Bobby Slowick, on the front porch of Chris Strouser, and on the front porch of the pupils of Chris Strouser, the Texans' offensive line. That is abundantly clear. They kept every other coach on the offensive side of the ball other than those two guys. They promoted the assistant coach for the offensive line. So it's not as though they said the whole offensive line operation was bad coaching-wise. They thought enough of Cole Popovich to actually make him the new offensive line coach. So the blame is being squarely placed there. So we saw that play out with the firing of Bobby Slowick, the hiring of Nick Caley, the firing of Chris Strouser, the promotion of Cole Popovich. Now we're seeing where it's being blamed, where the finger is being pointed positionally with respect to the roster, and it's the offensive line. And I am here for it. I am 100% in support of that. I totally agree with it. I don't know that I've ever seen a team react this swiftly to a deficiency. The closest thing I can think of in Texans history is when the defense in 2010 was so bad that the Texans just murdered free agency that offseason and the draft, and then getting Wade Phillips and all that. Hopefully they're able to do something similar with the offensive line. Does this mean the offensive line that they assemble here is going to be a top 5 offensive line? No. But if they can just assemble an average offensive line that listens in class and does things their coaches ask them to do, by the way, with a coach who's probably asking them to do things that are more within their capabilities, then I think we're going to be okay here. But Shaq Mason is gone, cut. Laramie Tunsil is gone, traded. Kenyon Green is gone, traded. But it's not quite the same type of trade as the Laramie Tunsil deal. And yet I love the return on that with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. So we'll talk about that as well. But if we're taking these things one at a time, and then we'll get into the mailbag, the trade sending Tunsil out. Back in 2019, we know that Tunsil, during the Bill O'Brien reign of terror, was brought here for 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick from the Dolphins here. And that was your garden variety NFL trade. Now it was a massive overpay, obviously, for a huge position of need at the time for the Texans, but it was done for football reasons. The thing that makes this second Tunsil trade, the one shipping him out, much more compelling and intriguing and remarkable to me is that it's being done for, in my mind, reasons other than football. There are some football reasons as to why. Laramie Tunsil, not a great run blocker. Laramie Tunsil, 12 false starts. Laramie Tunsil, practice is not really his deal, that kind of thing. Like Laramie Tunsil, not swarming. And that's where it gets into this trade. I think this trade was done for reasons of culture. And my gut reaction when I heard Laramie Tunsil got traded was that the opportunity to reimagine that offensive line room and what the culture will be like in that room, that opportunity was finally presented with trading Laramie Tunsil. You were never, ever, ever going to be able to change the culture of that offensive line room from the laissez-faire, skinny jean, Coachella, man purse era that we were in, unless you got the biggest man purse user out of there in Laramie Tunsil. So Laramie, and I said this on Washington radio today, he is a paycheck player. He is 100% a paycheck player, which has served him well. He's gotten paid a lot, and you can get away with being a paycheck player when you're actually good at what you do. but he's not good at everything he does, and he doesn't seem to really be interested in getting better at the things he could clearly be good at. He's talented enough to be good at these things. He should have been a former top 5 pick. He's a former top 15 pick. Couldn't stay away from the weed. And somebody hijacked his Twitter account. I will give him that. But the bottom line is DeMeco Ryans wants rabid dogs, and Laramie Tunsil is the world's biggest poodle. So that's number one. Those are my thoughts on the Tunsil, my initial thoughts on the Tunsil trade. This is something where we'll be talking about this all offseason. It's a huge, huge deal. I like what they got in the deal too, by the way. Extra 3, extra 2 over the next couple of years. I think there's a good chance that they end up re-gifting that draft capital to somebody else to move around in the draft. We'll see. I could go either way, and there's mailbag questions about the draft, so I don't want to cannibalize the mailbag. As far as the Kenyon Green trade goes, we know how he arrived here, 15th pick in the draft, and it's been an unmitigated disaster. Some of that Kenyon Green's fault, some of it injury, bad injury luck, and I would imagine some of it coaching, poor coaching. But we know he came into the Texans building injured after he was drafted. I mean, he was banged up in college, and then he struggled his entire rookie year, missed his whole second season with a shoulder injury, was about to get benched in his third season before getting hurt again. The only good thing I can say football wise about Kenyon Green, because he seems like a nice guy, he seems like a great dude, so I have nothing bad personally to say about him. The only nice thing I can say, though, about the football experience with Kenyon Green is I really admire the way he came back from all his injuries this past season. When he missed 2023, man, he came back in amazing shape. He was in the building all the time. Good for him. You know, he attacked it every day, according to guys who were there. It turns out he may just not be a very good NFL football player. Now, if it doesn't work out for him in Philly, then it's not going to work out for him anywhere. Jeff Stoutland, the O-line coach with Philadelphia, is the best in the business. If he doesn't get something out of a former first-round pick in Kenyon Green, then it's just not there. So I'd be excited if I were Green and I were going there. You know, it's for what he does. It's like he just got hired by the best company that you could possibly get hired by. They've got all the resources that you need to be successful in your career at Philadelphia Eagles Incorporated. I love that Nick Caserio was able to extract at least some value out of Kenyon Green. It was looking like it is, and it has been a major bust of a pick. Like, I don't want to sit here and say that because they were able to get C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a very good player who's only 27 years old, big hitter, fits right in. Fits in perfectly. A secondary of C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Kalen Bullock at safety, Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley Jr. at corner, with Jalen Petrie playing whatever rover, star, slot corner spot they want to put him at. Holy smokes, that is a secondary. That is a pipe-swinging, swarmy secondary. So that's good. You extracted some value out of Kenyon Green, but you could have had Kyle Hamilton, if you just stayed at 13 and picked. So there's that. But good job by Nick at least being able to get something for Kenyon Green, and having it be something that a piece that I think is necessary and going to be a really good fit in CJ. And good luck to Kenyon Green. I really do wish him the best of luck. Now, the next question is Titus Howard safe? And, of course, if you're trading Tunsil, nobody's safe because he's actually good at his job. You had to cut Shaq Mason, and then you had the Kenyon Green trade, which was a unique opportunity. If I were Titus, I'd have my head on a swivel, man. I personally hope that Caceres trades Titus. If this thing is just a total teardown and a build back up, that's a ballsy set of moves in an offseason. So you cannot question the aggressiveness with which Nick Caserio and DeMeco Ryans are attacking what went wrong. And if I'm CJ Stroud, I'm actually looking at this going, man, I'm digging this. He's probably not thrilled that they traded Tunsil, but let's see what the solution ends up being at left tackle. Let's see if it's a better solution overall. The overall line, just getting Tunsil out of that room. If the vibe in that room turns into one where guys are dogs in there, where like that it is a room that has the level of love for physicality and bloodlust that the defense has. Those will all be very positive things. So if you want to tear it down to the studs and build it back up, great. I am thrilled that D'Amico Ryans is a coach who is willing to fire friends, who is willing to trade Pro Bowl players. These are bold moves, and you should be happy that your team is doing them. That's my opinion on it. All right. As far as the other free agency signings go, there haven't been any that I've loved or hated. I mean, they've all been very lower level things. I like the guys they're bringing back. Mario Edwards is coming back. Sheldon Rankins, after a year in Cincinnati, is back. Those are two nice pieces on the defensive line. I still think it's in play that they could take a defensive lineman on the interior in the draft. I think offensive line right now, unless they're making a bunch of signings that we don't know about in the next few days, that's the priority in the draft. I could see them using at least two of their first 3 or 4 picks on offensive linemen, including that 25th overall pick. The one signing that seems to get the ladies all worked up is Braxton Berrios. It's not because he's handsome. I mean, he is handsome. He's a good-looking young guy. But his girlfriend is Alex Earl, who I just found out existed within the last 24 hours. But apparently she's a big deal on TikTok. So training camp just got more interesting. We may have a slew of very attractive Houston women hanging out at training camp because they want to get near Alex Earl, or they're already in her inner circle and she's able to bring them. Now, Berrios as a player is a 1-year, $2 million player. He might not even make the team. The Texans social media team is praying that Braxton Berrios makes the team. And there may be a spot for him. Look, it's wide receiver. They haven't made any huge moves at wide receiver during this slew of moves that they've made. So it's been a lot of lower level signings. The most expensive one, I think, is Rankins at $7 million a year in terms of average annual value. The more expensive moves have been the trades for Christian Kirk, who's a $16 million guy, and then C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who I believe is making $19 million over the next 2 years. So call it $9.5 million a year. Those have been the more expensive moves, the trades that they've made. So 3 trades for Nick Caserio, and I'm thumbs up on all 3 of them. Christian Kirk, thumbs up. Laramie Tunsil, gone for a bunch of picks, thumbs up. And obviously Kenyon Green, getting 2 years of C.J. Gardner-Johnson out of a Kenyon Green trade. The 2 teams flip-flop picks in that deal too. It was Kenyon and a 5th for Gardner-Johnson and a 6th. Big deal. You move down 1 round where you end up drafting a guy you probably could have drafted anyways if you wanted to in the 5th. It's any sort of shuffling on day 3 where teams are moving back or up spots. That's change, like seat cushion change to me. All right. So there you go. So let's get into the mailbag here. houmailbag@gmail.com. I'm going to rapid fire some email questions here. And then it's beautiful outside. So I got to get outside, go for my little 4-mile walk. So let's do this mailbag here, peeps. Shall we? We having fun? I'm having fun. This has been a great couple of days. You know what? To that point, I'm going to do a quick phone check here and just make sure that nothing has occurred. Rams wide receiver Puka Nacua is switching jersey numbers. Because of Devontae Adams. I hope he got paid for it, man. Hope you got paid. All right. So, yeah, nothing new that I've seen Texan-wise on my phone. All right, here we go. Dave in Round Rock. I'm thrilled with the trade of Laramie Tunsil. I listened to Clint Stoerner talk about it and agree with every word he said. A captain should lead his troops to success. Tunsil's captaincy was more like a ceremonial title with no obligations. Let's hope the O-line will be held to a higher standard. Yeah, let's hope that the team gets better at picking captains. How about that? How about they make that a homework assignment for the offseason? Actually pick guys for captains who love to maul people on a football field. How about doing that? I didn't hear what Clint said. I know he's not a fan of this offensive line. I know he's been a fan of what they've done so far and tearing it down, best I can tell at reading his tweets. And I do think there's something like that. When you're the best player on an offensive line, you're the best player and the captain, and you have holes in your game like Laramie does, you're really just good at one thing. On an offensive line that's never really been good since you got here in 2019, I don't have a huge problem with you getting traded for a bunch of draft picks and seeing what else we can find at left tackle. This whole thing of his pass block win rate and his ability to protect the passer, it's all real. It's all he's very, very good at all of it. the problem is that the things he's not very good at, Laramie Tunsil, don't really show up on Pro Football Focus anywhere. Don't really show up in a box score. Don't really show up unless you watch the Texans every Sunday. This is truly a situation of if you know, you know. And I feel like everybody outside of Houston looks at what the Texans are doing and is like, what are they doing? They were already bad at protecting the passer, and they traded their best pass protector. I think the key here is, like, what are they doing? Nick Caserio has largely made good moves over the last couple of years. So if the Texans are trading their best pass protector off of an offensive line that's not good at protecting the passer as a whole, shouldn't that tell you something about that player? Shouldn't that tell you something about the non-playing part of that player? Shouldn't it tell you something that reportedly Nick Caserio called several teams that had a need at tackle offering Laramie Tunsil and nobody else really wanted in on that? So, look, I know I'm talking to an audience that largely agrees with me. So this is kind of me talking it all out with you and pointing our fingers at everybody else saying, hey, man, we here in Houston think this was a good deal. I put up a poll. 88% of the people said they liked the deal out of 3,000. All right. Thanks, Dave. JR and Spicewood. Hey, Sean, picture this. It's you versus Nick Caserio in the big WrestleMania main event this offseason. Oh, man. Boy, he would get me in cardio. I tell you that right now. But I think I would probably dirty my way to a win. In JR's scenario, I do win this bout at WrestleMania. Why is he doing this? Why is he putting us in the ring at WrestleMania, JR and Spicewood? Here's why. He said your prize is you get to pick the position drafted in each of the first 4 rounds of the 2025 draft. Which positions are you drafting? Okay. Before they went and got CJ Gardner-Johnson, believe it or not, safety would have been in there. I think offensive line by sheer necessity at this point. I don't know that they're going to find all their solutions here in free agency. So I think offensive line, I would say offensive line and wide receiver in the first and second round. And I don't care which order. Probably O-line first because it's a bigger need, but I love Matthew Golden from the University of Texas. If he's there at 25, man, I just picture him catching so many balls from CJ, short routes over the middle, down the field. I love his game. So I would say offensive line, wide receiver. I am going to say cornerback. They need more depth at cornerback. They're deep at safety now, man. I mean, they re-signed MJ Stewart. They traded for CJ Gardner-Johnson. Jimmy Ward is still on this team. Kalen Bullock's on the team. Jalen Petrie. That is one position group that may be nailed down before camp even starts. I'm not a huge MJ Stewart guy. They seem to like him on special teams. They re-signed him. He had a lot of penalties this year on special teams. But, so I would say O-line, wide receiver, cornerback, running back. Running back's an easy one. But there's so many good running backs in this draft, take one. So that's what I would do. JR says also, how do you think the trade for Kirk affects the future for John Mechie on the Texans? Could they trade him maybe to the Panthers for a late round pick? I could see them trading Mechie, and I could see them trading him to the Panthers because he was teammates with Bryce Young and getting a 6th or a 7th for him or something, something along those lines. For sure. I think I don't know that the Kirk trade affects Mechie's spot on the team other than it's just another receiver here he's competing with. I don't know that, because I'm wondering if you're asking JR because Kirk plays almost exclusively in the slot and maybe that's where you see Mechie's future. I think John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson, if the Texans do the right things in the draft and free agency, then I don't think I think one of those guys should be gone. They entering this offseason, they were the next 2 guys after Nico Collins. But I think Nico's obviously on this team. Christian Kirk is obviously going to be on this team. I think they're going to draft a receiver in the first or second round who makes this team. There's 3 spots already, and then they brought in Berrios. They brought in Christian Watson from Kansas City, who's an interesting signing. So if I had to guess, I think one of Mechie and Hutchinson is going to be on the team. Purely a guess. Kyle in Denver. Hey, Sean, if the Texans O-line is worse than last year, after trading away Tunsil, could Caserio's job be on the line? Thanks. If they win games, then I don't think so. Now, if they fall to 5-12 or something, and it's with CJ, with CJ not getting injured, it's CJ playing 15, 16, 17 games, then it's possible, I guess. Look at this team and where they are now compared to where they were 2 years ago. It took Nick 2 years to dig out from underneath the Bill O'Brien rubble. So I don't envision a scenario where Nick Caserio gets on the hot seat. The O-line rebuild not working or being a miscalculation. Look, it was Nick miscalculating on this group to begin with that kind of put them in this spot. So maybe so. I don't know. Maybe. I think overall Nick's done a really, really good job as the GM of this team. So the O-line has been one of the blind spots. I will admit that. But I think overall he's done a really good job. Spike says, should we be optimistic about Dalton Schultz playing better next year? I know last year was bad, but the whole offense wasn't great. There's optimism with a new OC and new-ish O-line coach should improve the overall offensive operation. If that's the case, then do you expect Schultz to improve with that? I think the biggest thing that's going to help Dalton Schultz is, one, he plays adjacent to that offensive line. If they get an offensive line that's got a little bit more of a dog mentality, then maybe some of that rubs off on Dalton Schultz. You know what I mean? Like Dalton Schultz blocked kind of soft this year, but he was one of several guys who were doing that. If all of a sudden they've got an offensive line that's doing its job and all of a sudden you got 86 out here who can't do his and it shines more of a spotlight on it, then maybe Dalton becomes a little bit nastier too. I think the biggest thing for Dalton is the background with Nick Caley. His background as a tight ends coach, I think, is going to be really good. I think the fact that Bobby Slowick never was really a position coach, kind of getting his hands in the clay and doing a lot of the teaching and the fundamentals. He's a passing game coordinator in San Francisco. He seems like more of a chalkboard guy when he was in Houston than a fundamentals guy. Nick Caley seems like a fundamentals guy, a fundamentalist, if you will. Then I think that's going to be good for Dalton Schultz. Dalton's not going anywhere. I've seen some people begging that, hey, hopefully Dalton's next. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think they're trading or moving on from Dalton Schultz. But I didn't think they'd be trading or moving on from Laramie Tunsil either. So what the hell do I know? Corey and Austin, just listen to your mailbag episode. Thanks for including my question. Oh, the Corey was the one who was asking for places to eat. I wasn't sure you would because of your sponsorship with Taquerias, Arandas, and Beck's. And I made sure to recommend, big recommendation for Beck's these days for me. But he said he wasn't sure I would put my favorite restaurants out there. He thought that I'd maybe say they weren't very good and pull a Ross Tucker. If you don't know what we're talking about, listen to Payne and Pendergast. So good. Yeah, man. He said he's staying in Edo. I would say the one thing I would say about Edo, I didn't recommend any restaurants down there. There's some really good restaurants along Navigation in Edo. Probably the most famous one is the Original Nipa's down there. If you want Tex-Mex or Mexican food, just drive down Navigation and pick any of the spots down there. There's an El Tiempo down there, if I'm not mistaken. There's the Original Nipa's on Navigation. If I'm in the mood for that, for Mexican food, that's my go-to. But thank you, Corey. He says, keep up the good work. I'll try. Tanish at UT in Austin is in again. Tanish, appreciate that. What are your thoughts on the Texans trading up or down in this year's draft? I have two thoughts on that, one for up and one for down. And I'm assuming you're talking about with the first pick. One of the reasons I love the Tunsil trade is that the Texans had gotten a little light in their pick satchel over this year. We're so used to them having, 8, 9 picks in a draft from the last couple of years with the plethora of picks from the Watson trade and Nick moving around and things like that, that it felt a little light this year. So this draft supposedly, and I'm purely going off of things that I've read from multiple people. This is not me. After all the film I broke down on that TV right over there, here's how I feel. Like, I'm not a film breakdown guy. I'm a guy who watches a lot of college football during the season, formulates opinions on the games that I watch. I gamble a lot on college football, which makes me very immersed in who is good and who is not. But I don't watch all the teams out there. The ones I rely on that I think are the best are John Harris, who is second to none. He is bar none the best at doing the film work, He's the most informed when it comes to having actually put eyes on the film. He goes to the Senior Bowl. He goes to the Combine. He talks to people. He's got a great website, footballtakeover.com, which is a nominal fee to subscribe to and is worth every penny of the $3 or $4 a month it costs. Can't recommend that highly enough. John Harris. I like Daniel Jeremiah a lot. I think Lance Zierlein does a really good job on his profiles on NFL.com if you really want to get in the weeds on a prospect. Everything that people are saying about this draft is that between 20 and 60, there's not a ton of difference between those players. So I'm all for them moving back to 25 and doing the same thing they did last year. They moved back to 42 last year, and they picked up an extra second-round pick that they used to go get Stephon Diggs. If they want to trade back from 25 into the second round and pick up some more picks to either go get players this year or like a trade or to use to draft players now or in future years, I am all for that just purely quantitatively, blindly, without knowing what the draft looks like. The trade up scenarios that I would entertain, keep in mind, I'm the one that said if Brock Bowers got to like 15 last year that the Texans should trade up for him, and he had a record-setting rookie year. So I may as well be a draft analyst, a draft expert. I would, if Tyler Warren or Will Campbell got into a range where you can move up and get him, especially Will Campbell, the tackle out of LSU. Tyler Warren's the tight end out of Penn State. He'd need to drop a little closer to the Texans for me to want to trade up for him. You know, probably get into that 15 to 20 range there. Probably doesn't cost you more than maybe a future 2 or 3, something like that, to move up 8 to 10 spots. I think Will Campbell of LSU could be for the offensive line room what Will Anderson was for the defense when they traded for him. When they made that big trade up and overpaid on paper to get Will Anderson, part of the reason they did that was for him to be the culture setter on the defensive side of the ball. And the culture setter on the offensive side is always going to be the quarterback, we hope. I think that's the case with CJ. But I think Will Campbell, from the interviews I've seen, just from the, from his workout, from watching a ton of LSU. I watch probably LSU almost as much as I watch Notre Dame, just because I root against Brian Kelly. I like watching and rooting against Brian Kelly. But Will Campbell, man, he is a dog. He is someone who likes violence. He is someone who likes to steal the love of football from people, which I am here for. So that's what I would do. Yeah, I am not married to either trading up or trading down, but I am open to both. I may as well be a GM. I'm open for business. All right, last one. This is from BK. It says, Mr. Pendergast, Mr. Utopia, keeper of the morning Seth, and bearer of the smack off belt. I'm going to skip down BK here. Just a ton of stuff here on Cougs basketball, which I'm all thumbs up on Cougs basketball. I'm going to skip down to the football stuff. The Texans are wheeling and dealing. I think it's fair to sum up the team's philosophy as SWARM, and rather than just a lame acronym or questionable accuracy, looking at you, Liam Cohen. Yeah, Liam Cohen with fast. Fundamentally sound. Well, that's not an F. That's an FS. That's FASAST. And he's got F is, I forget what it is, something strategically minded or strong-minded. It's like FASAST. D'Amico actually means it. Trading Tunsil is a big tell. I'm fine with the picks in return. We need Nicky the Vest to really hit on a couple. With this year's first week, whether we get a D tackle or an O lineman, I think we need a vet to protect CJ's blind side. If Nick wants a wide receiver, dude better come ready to play. Let me stop. Partially because I have to cough, but I also want to comment. I agree with that. If you're drafting a wide receiver in the first round, he's got to be ready to go. He's got to be ready to be a starter. And D'Amico said that in one of the interviews he did. I think it was at the Combine, his interview he did. He said, we expect first rounders to be starters. You know, more or less that's what he said. BK says third. I want to give it up to one of the biggest Houston fans ever, the late state rep, mayor, Congressman Sylvester Turner. Dude absolutely loved our Houston teams, and I'll put his sports record against anyone sitting in the mayor's seat. Consider this: from the time in charge, 2016 to the end of 2023, Astros golden era, Yep, 7 ALCS appearances, 2 world titles. Rockets from a Western Conference final, 1 hamstring away from beating the Warriors, to the foundation of a rebuild. Texans 2 playoff wins, greatest draft in the history of the team in 2023. Getting rid of Deshaun Watson by robbing Cleveland. Okay, are we giving credit to the mayor's office for these things, BK, or are we merely saying that he, and then the Cougs basketball, obviously, the Final Four and Elite Eight, 2 Sweet 16s. Those are all well and good, and I don't want to disrespect. Mayor Turner was very big in the sports community, but I just want to make sure: are we putting the Deshaun Watson trade? Does the mayor's office get credit for the Deshaun Watson trade? I love it. I do love that for Mayor Turner, that his footprint had such a compelling sports history there. All kidding aside, I am happy about that. I feel awful that he passed away, and I know he was having some health issues. But man, 70 in this day and age, 70, too young, man. We've officially reached a day and age where 70 has gone too soon. Seth and I had this conversation on Payne and Pendergast one day, like, what's gone too soon? What's the new definition for gone too soon? And the conclusion we arrived at is it really depends on the lifestyle that the person lived who we're talking about in this case. They lived a lifestyle that was conducive to passing away early, then you can't really say gone too soon. If they were a crackhead or their hobby was straddling the line in the middle of the Katy freeway, then whatever time you get is really gravy. But I would say 70 years old for Mayor Turner, gone too soon. BK says, rest in peace, my man. You bet your bottom dollar Turner is lobbying God to help the Cougs in this year's tournament. It's good. Also wants to say John Runyon is still a punk ass bitch. Of course he is, BK. Of course he is. All right. Good mailbag this week. Again, if you want to hit me with some mailbag questions. I had a lot of mailbag questions in the last 24 hours on Tunsil, and I had a few on Kenyon Green. I kind of laid my thoughts out at the beginning in response to all those. That shouldn't dissuade you from continuing to send emails to the show. It's just for brevity's sake. Sometimes I take items that have multiple emails and just turn them into a topic. So that's what that is. Big thanks to Jared Rowland, my producer, for getting this episode out to you and every episode out to you on a timely basis. We'll see you later this week. Kind of a free agency wrap up. We'll start to look ahead at the draft and all kinds of good stuff. Subscribe, rate, and review, baby. That's it. We will see you next time. Have a great week, everybody. It's been the Utopia Football Podcast.
Building a portfolio with Fidelity Basket Portfolios is kind of like making a sandwich. It's as simple as picking your stocks and ETFs, sort of like your meats and other toppings, and managing it as one big, juicy investment. Now that's pretty good. Learn more at fidelity.com/baskets. Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC. Member NYSE SIPC.